outcomes are out of our control, right? Like once the ball leaves your bat, once the ball leaves your hand, you lose all control. It's not in your hand anymore. It's not on your bat anymore, right?
Right.
So what can we do that's in our control to maximize our chances of success? If I can look in the mirror at the end of the day and say I did everything I could to maximize my chances of success and it didn't happen, then I want you to be okay with that.
Hey guys, and welcome to the Skilled Dad Podcast. My name's Zach Reeser. I'm your host. And if this is your first time joining us, I want to say welcome. And if you're one of the returning members of the Skilled Dad Society, which means that you are learning something new, you're getting better, and you're driving towards leading your family, leading yourself, building your community. And this is our podcast, and I'm glad you're here. And this is our podcast in the year 2025. And my family and I were sitting down the other day. My wife looks at me. She goes, this is like the year that is in a lot of sci-fi movies in the past. And I was looking at her, I was like, you're absolutely right. And now all of a sudden we have all these cool things that are popping up that we used to see when we were growing up in the 90s. So some of you out there maybe had this idea from Star Wars or Star Trek. They're like, I want to make that a real thing. And now here we are. So we've made it to the future, boys. Now let's go build into the new future. And part of that is building our kids and our family and having some fun. And this is the time of recording. This is the beginning of the new year, but also when some of us are getting signed up for soccer and for baseball and all that. And Christmas is gone. New Year's is here. Now we're looking for seasons and sports seasons and all that. So I've got a guest in here that's going to be epic for some of that conversation. He's a dad like us. And so we're going to learn from his story, but we might dive into a little bit of the kids / youngin. I don't know what you'd want to say, sports. And then also maybe some of our roles in that, because I'm a big advocate for it. I'll save that for later. Mr. Mike Huber is on with me. Mike, welcome to the Skilled Dad Podcast.
Oh, Zach, thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
Hey, I'm glad that you're here. And I'm here with you in the cold because we got a nice snowstorm. You talked to your buddy from Atlanta recently. It's like going to be snowmageddon. I'm in Nashville. All the bread, all the milk, all the random things are gone. Eggs, forget about it. So no French toast. But so if you see any like mist coming from my mouth, that's totally normal because it's cold. So, but Mike, and you're joining me from Northeast area, right?
Central New
Northeast.
Jersey. Yeah,
Jersey.
Central New Jersey, just south of New York City.
Yeah, so you guys just got through one of those.
We had a little bit of snow, but it's been really cold here. Really cold, which is good though. I like the winter. It feels like we're getting the seasons that we signed up for.
That's right. That seems appropriate. I mean, it's January. So at least right now it is. If you're listening to this in July, enjoy that hot sun in your shorts. That's great. Well, Mike, I'd love to just, you're a sports psychologist. Now you come from more of a corporate background. We all have a journey, some different times and seasons that we learn from and spend. And you're a dad of 2, right?
Yep. I'm a dad of 2 teenagers.
Yeah, 2 teenagers. So I'm going to take some notes today, all the things that I can prepare for. But I'd love to hand the mic over to you. I know you and I have spent some time together prior to this, but my audience hasn't. So tell us some about your story, some about yourself, and we'll just take the conversation from there.
So first and foremost, I'm a father of 2 teenagers, like I said, Zach. So I have a son who's 16, who's a junior in high school, and a daughter who's 14, who's a freshman in high school. And they're obviously my number one priority and my pride and joy. They're both athletes. They both play soccer at the high school level, and they play travel soccer. So I get to experience youth sport from a parental perspective, which is still pretty hard, even though my professional responsibility is to young athletes their age, in terms of working as a mental performance coach. So, I am in the sports psychology field. I got into that largely as a result of my experiences being a coach to my kids. I've been practicing as a mental performance coach since 2020. So just as COVID was starting, great timing. I went back to school prior to that, and before that, I was in corporate consulting for like 19 years. And I kind of burned out on that line of work. I just lacked fulfillment and joy, and I started questioning sort of my place in the world. And then I started to see my kids grow up in sports, and I would coach them, and I loved it so much. Not just coaching them, not because I wanted them to be, you know, get preferential treatment or be special, but I really wanted to be involved. I was always an athlete. Um, and I started to see some of the things in the sport environment where it just kind of made me scratch my head. The way that parents talk to their kids, the way that coaches coach, sports at the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old level. And it just didn't make any sense to me. And it got me thinking like, hey, there's probably room, to inject some help into the process. Right. And I thought, as I kind of reconsidered my professional life, and I didn't know that I wanted to be in sports psychology, on day one. It took me probably 3 or 4 years of contemplation and research and hard work figuring out like, hey, what do I want to do with my life when I grow up? But once I did, it just made the most sense of, hey, I'm going to have an opportunity to help kids and their families, and their parents, kind of bridge the gap between this world that we live in and sort of their experience.
Yeah.
And it's been really, really rewarding. I can't say that enough.
Well, since you found yourself, this version of yourself where we are, at least, who are you primarily working with? So you mentioned you're bridging the gap between, the kind of the kids and the parents. Um, is it mostly high schoolers? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, when I do my elevator pitch, I tell people I work with athletes from the ages 12 to 22.
Right.
And that's not exclusive, but I've had kids as young as 7, 8, 9 years old, which, yeah, there's some value in that for sure. It's not my primary target audience. I actually had some trepidation in doing that, just because I just felt like the kids were so old. I mean, they're so young, excuse me, that I was like, it's almost too young. But that was my bias. And I found that working with younger children actually has value if the right situation presents itself. But really, it's that sort of middle school, high school, and even college age athlete, who are kind of starting to make choices for themselves, right? I want to be more competitive. I want to compete in high school. I want to compete in college. I want to maybe even be professional. And, the pressure, the environment, they don't know how to deal with the stress of the world that they're in, right? Whether it's with coaches or social media or their parents or just their own internal stuff, right? Like I can't stress that enough. I mean, one of the reasons why I got into sports psychology was it was really a big part of it was based on my own experience as an athlete, 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, we didn't have social media. My parents didn't know anything about sports. We didn't have any money. And still I was ripping myself to shreds when I didn't play well. And so there is this element of, hey, there's also this internal, fire motivation, but also perfectionism in a lot of cases that is like the kind of center point of everything. And then you add external stuff and that sort of throws gas on the fire. And so
Right.
really what I like to be able to do is give the kids who come to me and the families that come to me the tools to manage it, right? Like we can't, like I would say to a client, you can only control what you can control. And the environment is largely out of your control. So what do we do to coach ourselves through those situations where we can't handle, we're having a hard time handling that stuff around us that we can't do anything about? Let's break it down to the basics: our breathing, our mindfulness, our self-talk, the way we see things in the world, our perspective, and being able to sort of slow things down and get back to the present moment and have fun doing what we want to do versus feeling like it's a job.
I think when you say have fun, and you said that talking to the 7, 8-year-olds, they were too young, but at first you said too old, and it's funny because in my mind, there was a moment where I was, like it does seem super young, and you also then see 4 or 5-year-olds, right, that have started baseball. But there's a different intensity level for different teams. So
Yeah.
I have no illusions necessarily that, um, just because it's not as maybe his passion or actual, yeah, immediate strength compared to my son, when we do baseball, he loves it. And I want him to love it because of the things that he's going to get from it through, however long he plays.
Hmm.
Um, I've seen the other side too, where it is super intense, and I watch the kids and I've coached the kids and I'm just like, I hope this kid doesn't get burned out because he got massive
Yeah.
talent. And so that's maybe some of that bridge building too. I mean, you work with kids on things that they can do. How's it you work with parents?
Yeah, I think I will say this, one of the things I hear a lot from people or they ask me, when they find out what I do for a living, and the first question I get oftentimes is, "You must deal with a lot of crazy parents." And the answer to that question is actually no. And here's why. Here's why, because the parents who come to me are the ones that know that they've kind of reached their limit of their ability to help their child, right? They're sort of at their wits' end. They're really struggling, or they realize that there's some things that a objective outsider can do to help their kids build skills, right? They don't have to be necessarily performance skills. They can be life skills that they're struggling with, whether they don't the parent doesn't have the ability to provide those skills, or it's just it's a parent-child relationship issue. Like, yes, I have the right answers. Yes, I'm smart as a parent. Yes, I know what I'm telling you is accurate and true, and it's based on my experience. But as fathers, we know our kids don't always listen to us, right? Like, we could give them the best advice. We could be the smartest dads. We can work in sports psychology like I do, and I can give my teenagers advice, and they could say, "Dad, shut up." And, I think that's it, right? So for parents, I really do try to listen to them. I think that's actually the number one thing. I try to listen to parents because I think more than anything, they they are dealing with frustrations. They're dealing with stuff internally inside, like questioning their ability to like help their kids. And they have these frustrations and they have these conundrums and they're like, I want to just talk to somebody about it. Right. But I'm not going to go to see, necessarily go see a counselor or a therapist to talk about my kid's sports experience, but it is stressful. Right. And I could
Right.
talk to a guy like Mike who's going to listen and he's not going to judge me and I'm going to be able to dump all my stuff. And then I can give some suggestions back, but maybe it's just I'm listening. If I give advice, the number one piece of advice I usually give to parents is ask more questions, right? Make less statements and ask more questions because to your point, right? Like you're talking about your son, right? You want him to stay engaged. You want him to stay motivated to keep going on, right? You want him to keep going. Well, in order for that to happen, generally speaking, it has to be his experience, right? It has to be the kid's experience. So when I say to parents, ask questions, it's really about them getting comfortable with taking what I would say, like what I would call taking their hand off the wheel and now starting to be curious about what their kid is experiencing and learning more about what they need and learning more about what they're going through. And just by doing that, you kind of open the door to give advice a little more freely because now you're showing that you're actually valuing their opinion. You're asking for their feedback and you want to know what they're experiencing versus I don't care what you're experiencing. Like, here's what you need to do to get the outcome that really ostensibly as a parent I want. I want you to be better for whatever these reasons are. But we don't realize that consciously, it's subconscious. So, and I've explored that myself as a parent. Like I get whacked out sometimes with my kids. I get so mad and frustrated at my kids. And usually it's around effort and attitude. It's not around performance. But it just the same, like I identify too much with it. It's like, it's not my experience. It doesn't matter when my kid goes on to start in high school or play in college or be a professional. It's nothing to do with me. I want that for them if they want it. But if they don't want it, then why am I pushing for it? What's the motivation on my part? Now I'm just trying to will something that's not going to happen.
It has nothing to do with me. I mean, that's kind of a powerful statement because you can hear on some of the vicarious living of unfulfilled hopes, dreams, and wishes. Now, I think just to be clear, I can only speak from my own experience and observations. This is what we're kind of focusing on is maybe a smaller group,
Hmm.
but it's an intense group as
Yeah.
far as some of the parents that are focusing on this. And so I don't want to create the idea that we're all like that. Now, I think those
Yeah.
of us that have been competitive, you can see it, but then I've seen the struggle too of, and this is the topic I want to get to in a second, the struggle of like, you got the attitude, you got the effort, but just the natural athleticism may not be there like dad used to have or wanted or something like that. And so you figure out how to give that coaching. And what I've actually seen is a lot of guys that I've talked to have hesitated on coaching because they don't think they have the skills to do the coaching. and then the byproduct is there's no stinking coaches. So I want to hit on some of that in a
Yeah.
minute. But the the other thing that you said about sometimes they don't listen to you, I'm going to actually use a story with my wife. But I think it ties or I'll be in trouble. So don't listen to that episode. It wasn't a good episode. You don't listen. But we used to live in Colorado and we would ski a lot. And so when we were first learning to ski, um, I was working on trying to help her, ski. And a lot of guys probably like shaking their head. Well, I did it. Okay. And so it ended in some frustration, probably in both parties. And I was like, let's get you a lesson. And so I was there for part of that lesson and they said the exact same things. And they were exactly right when they said them, but when I said them, it was not right. So, I think that could create a hesitation sometimes for people to step up and coach because of what you
Yeah.
just said about our kids aren't going to necessarily want to listen to us. And in my experience, we've gotten, we found ways to not have that happen. And it's worked out great. But I want to get kind of your thoughts on, I said a lot of words, but your thoughts on just kind of us stepping in as dads, maybe the importance, especially in the younger years before they get to the point where now they're running, travel teams and more
Mhm.
competitive leagues and things like that. But the importance of us stepping up, things that we can do, and just your general thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it being there, right? Contributing, participating, showing up, like that's the most important thing, especially in those very, very early years, right? The 5, 6, 7 T-ball kind of years, right? Like as much as we think about our sport knowledge and we think about, well, I don't have the ability to, it's really just about showing up, smiling, helping the kids have fun, giving them the opportunity to have the experience, right? And having fun with it too, right? I remember those are my fondest moments. Like I coached 5-year-old, baseball and with my kids, and like the kids just had no clue. They didn't even know that we had to teach them to run in the right direction. They put their helmet on backwards. I mean, they're picking their nose, they're playing with daisies. I mean, it's really just about getting them out there, right? And, encouraging them, right? When they do something well, like letting them know, right? When they make a mistake, it's no big deal. And I think it is important. You don't have to be perfect, right? Because we live in a world now. I think you made a really good point, right? We live in a world now within most sports. By the time kids are 12 or 13 years old, they're getting handed off to professional coaches in a lot of cases, right? So we only have a small window to spend that time with our children and to be out there and to give to other children, right? Be a part of the community. I can't tell you how many times I've over the course of the 7 or 8 or 9 years where I coached just, town recreation sports, where I got a card from a kid or a parent saying like, "Oh, thank you so much. You're my favorite coach." And like that's really powerful stuff. That's what kids remember, right? They don't remember, "Oh, I learned how to throw a curveball." Maybe they do, I guess, but they don't really remember that technical stuff. They remember like, "Hey, this guy, put his arm around me and he smiled at me and he didn't yell at me," right? That's a big one, right? Those things are, if you can do those things as a coach, like you're winning, right? You're winning. And if you need help being a better coach, like you need better knowledge, like come on, there's YouTube and Google and other people, and there's all different ways to learn how to coach. I think and listen, it is uncomfortable for some people for whatever reason, and that's okay too, because listen, I think if we're being honest with ourselves, there are people that probably shouldn't coach,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
fair.
and they coach for the wrong reasons, or they coach for their reasons. I don't want to say they're wrong reasons. In their mind, they're the right reasons, but I'm there to facilitate my child's experience, and I get it, right? But like that's not, maybe for me, my opinion, the best reason. All that being said, we need coaches, right? Kids can't play if they don't have coaches.
Yeah,
Even bad coaches give the kids the opportunity to learn life lessons. Like we have to deal with bosses and we have to deal with people in the world. Like you're going to have a bad coach. That's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, to have a coach that doesn't know what they're doing or how to talk to you, because you're going to have to learn how to handle those things as you get older. We
right.
don't live in a perfect world. And I think that's one of the things that you said before, right? We take the kid who has the attitude and the effort and they smile and they run hard and they want to try. What we do with them is we really encourage them to focus on the improvement, right? And part of the improvement is being able to deal with adversity, whether it be a coach who's being hard on them, or teammates who's being hard on them, or mistakes that we make in front of other people. Those are all growth opportunities if we frame it that way, versus I have to be perfect, or I need to like get quiet and shut my mouth because I just got yelled at, right? Versus like, hey, I got yelled at for a reason, and I'm going to take that information and get better with it. Again, those are hard things to massage with young kids, but there are lessons in there to be learned if we focus on those.
Yeah. I'm taking notes. When I look down the snacks, I'm talking out because I'm taking some notes here. With the attitude and the effort, um, that's what I wrote down, was how to work through some of the adversity. Because at this point where I am, and I can only speak to my journey on this.
Yeah.
I started at 4 with soccer, and then it went to t-ball with baseball. Not me, but with my son
Yeah.
coaching.
Understand.
And then went back to soccer, and then went back to baseball. And now we're doing a little bit of both. And there weren't any coaches. So, and I always kind of wanted to coach. I love, stepping in and being able to see that growth. And in a couple of seasons, it was challenging to, I was head coach, to get others to participate, uh, you know, and I
Yeah.
think part of it was that there's a hesitation to like step on toes. I know it because that's been part of the conversation. Well, I don't want to step anybody's toes. It's like, look, if you don't feel, I say this to a lot of guys when I'm trying to recruit, like, you don't have to be the head coach if you don't want to be. Maybe that's good. If you never coach, you don't want to be head coach. You could still be the assistant, and everyone. And the cool thing I've seen is the teams where we've had a lot of dads step in, 4 or 5, 6 in some cases, to help out. It allows us to do more stations, to focus more intentionally on each individual. But also, one of the coaches is going to bring like his personality, his perspective, and then it's going to be different from another coach. And so there's this kind of harmony that you can
Mm.
create, which is really fulfilling, and we have a lot of fun. At this point in this 10U league, in the 10U time period, it does seem like the last couple seasons, and what we're going into, this transition period between, you've got the boys that didn't know anything, picking their noses, picking daisies, kicking dirt, all that, to now you've got some plays, some turns, the competitiveness is coming out
Yeah.
because the abilities are enhanced. And this is, I think, a point where I can see who's going to keep going and who's going to maybe decide not to. And so
Yeah.
it seems like the coaching um, focus is even more intense. Yet last couple seasons even more rewarding. And so, what would you say for somebody that's listening? They've heard me before, like, throw it out there, like, go coach. Just unless you know you really shouldn't for a good reason, then don't. You're
Yeah.
doing a great job with that. But if you're hesitant because your own abilities or confidence things, telling you, it's awesome. So,
Yeah. It
like,
is.
what would you say to somebody that maybe is just starting out, that's afraid to do the wrong things from your perspective, because you're working with the kids who are essentially experiencing these things? Like, what would you say to somebody that's hesitating, but maybe, I don't really know how I'm asking the question. But, like, what would you say to them?
Yeah. I would say be yourself, right? Like, and so that's a kind of generic answer, right? But like, think about what your strengths are, right? What you can bring to the table, right? Because I think, right, like you're right, like kids get to a certain level, like age level, where you feel like you've got to add more, right? You got to add more knowledge, you got to build on their skill. Absolutely get that, right? But at the end of the day, at 10, like, trust me, as a parent of teenagers, at 10, I thought my son was going to play high school baseball. My son does not play baseball anymore. He quit 2 years ago, right? He didn't like it. It was too slow. It was boring. It wasn't his thing. What I say that is like, don't worry about that, right? The kids who want to self-select in and out are going to do that, right? So show up for them and make it a good experience. The way that you can maximize the chances that any 10-year-old is going to stay in a sport is to make it fun, right? yes, they want to get better.
Mm.
You don't want them to be bored. Have a plan, do your research, go into practices with like, hey, we're going to do these things that are fun, but they're going to help them learn. But we're going to have fun, because if it's not fun to them, they're not going to stay. They're still 10, right? They're still 10 years old. And baseball, not only is baseball a slow game, right? And I played baseball to high school. It's my favorite sport to play. I loved it. I played in adulthood. Like I could scream from the mountaintops about how much I love baseball,
Right.
but I'm in the minority, right? For most people, baseball is slow. It's boring. There's too many rules, right? There's a ton of failure, right? As they get older, they start to strike out, and, it gets harder and you're not successful as much. So just make it fun and let them keep going to the point where as they get old, keep them in it until they get old enough that they can make the decision that this is for me, because they're going to make that decision anyway. So you might as well keep them in it as long as you can. And then they can decide like, hey, I really like this. Hey, I really want to go far with this. Hey, I want to put in more time. Hey, I want to go to my instructor. Hey, I want to play on a travel team. But if you don't create the environment for a 10U kid or 11U kid or a 9U kid to have fun, that's where you're going to lose them. So like, if you have that ability, like look in the mirror and go like, I can make this fun for a kid, then it's a job for you, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. That's, I would agree. I would agree. I do find myself, and I've got another coach where we've basically coin flipped for this year, who's going to do HC and who's going to do assistant coach, but we're going to do it together. Um, and because we've had fun, but we found, I think, this blend of, we want to make sure we have fun, but we also make sure that we do have discipline. And what we do is set expectations up front. Like we do game type things and
Yeah,
rallies and relays. So we have a great time. But we've also been on those teams where you just lose a lot. And we're at the point now where kids don't have fun when you're losing all. So we get to have that. We try to build that harmony of, keeping kids active, moving. Fun. And I'm talking about baseball, but this really applies to like soccer and other things too. I mean, um, but having fun, but also building on those fundamentals consistently. And if we don't have listening and we don't have those things, because I have seen some come from a household where there's just different expectations and way that they talk to adults. But on like this team, hey, we have respect to our teammates, respect to coaches,
of
coaches
course.
talking,
Yes.
no one else is talking. So fun, but not like massive free chaos. We're building that team. Um,
Yeah, and I was like listening to your answer, and I think a number one, one of the things that's really important. I don't care how old they are to a large extent is setting expectations right up front for them, right? A framework, even though they're 10, and reinforcing that, like, hey, these are the expectations that we have of you, and then continuing to communicate with them, right? That's something that I'm very big on, whether it's with a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old like that. I think this is kind of where things start to break down sometimes is there's a lack of communication, right? There's this, it's not two-way, it's one way, right? And when it's one way, I don't care if you're 10 or 11 or 12, you start to shut down because I don't feel like I have any autonomy in my experience, right? Now, that's not to say like you let the kids rule the roost, because you don't. There's got to be discipline and authority where it's like, okay, I'm the coach. At a certain point, this has to stop, right? There are limits to that. But if you give them some wiggle room in there and you give them the room to speak up for themselves in that experience, like now all of a sudden you've got a relationship, you're building a relationship with your athlete where they can respect and trust you. Right. And that's never too old, right? That's
right.
human being stuff. And I think that goes a long way, right? You have a structure, you have a framework, but then you've also got this like two-way dynamic of, hey, I can give you my opinion, or we can try things. Like I was thinking about an experience that like I've had a bunch of them coaching, but I remember one season I coached
Yeah.
baseball and they must have been 11 or 12 years old. And it was just it was a town league, it was a rec league. And I think we lost every single regular season game because if you want to pitch, you're going to pitch. If you want to catch, you're going to catch. We're going to move you around unless you're a danger to yourself or others. Like if you can't catch the ball, I'm not putting you behind the plate or I'm not pitching you. Right? I'm going
Right.
to put you in right field because I'm not putting you at first base because there's a safety issue. But if
Yeah.
you can do it, I'm going to play you there. But I said to them, okay, guys, well, now we're in the playoffs. Now we're going to play to win. And now we're going to play our best guys. And you know what happened was the kids who didn't play as much were like, we just want to win, right? Because they felt like they were a part of a team all through the regular season. And now it's like, hey, we want to win. I'd rather win with our best players and not play than lose and be on the field. And like, so I think you got to gauge that too, right? Like, not kids, some kids know their limits. Like they want to play, but they also don't want to be in the spotlight. They don't want to screw things up. They just want to be part of a unit. They want to, and I think it's that
Yeah.
understanding of each kid too. It's really valuable. And that's a hard thing to do with a big group. And, with little kids, you try to build relationships with them, but some kids just don't, they're not connecting, and that's okay too. But like, what I'm saying, like just kind of judging the room and being like, hey, like, listen, everyone's going to play, but when it's time to win, we're going to try to win. And
Right.
I think that that's a really good, kind of rule of thumb, because if we're always trying to win and we're sitting kids out that really want to play, like that's also not the right answer.
Right. Yeah. Especially for rec league. I love that's some really good that's a really good kind of thing that you found there. You know, I could see the losing all the games, but then getting the playoffs and rocking it. Like you don't know that at the beginning, but at the end you had the outcome. And it reminds me there's one season that we had a couple of years ago, and the coach was really good. He had fun, he was straight to the point, and he and another assistant coach had coached together. So a couple of us were like, we don't know what to do with our hands. You just tell us where to go and what to do when you need us. But he was really big, and I took this away from him as learning. So if anybody's going to coaching, like here's some of the stories that you can
Yep.
try and see. But he was really big on just like, hey, swing. Like I just want you to swing. I want you to
Yes.
strike out every single time. Nobody go out swinging, and we know that. But I mean, he was just so focused on just go, and we didn't measure the scores at all by runs. We measured by hits. So even if we lost, we typically won in hits because we're swinging more. And I think that's what I love about team sports, and then what role we play as coaches and what our kids get to experience is that it is a sport and we have fun. But to your point earlier, there's so many things that we learn in this environment that applies to life later.
Yeah.
And that was a big one for me. And everyone's, you get them to hit, you get them to hit, get them to swing.
We got to start right. Exactly. Right. And I think, and that's something that I was big on. Be aggressive, right? Go swing the bat. Don't watch the ball go by. But then also like, hey, if you swing the bat, like reward with, like encourage them, like, hey, that's a good putt. Right. Now you're giving them confidence that the swing was good. Right. Now they put a bat on the ball. Hey, look, now you made progress. Right. Now you connected with the ball. Now let's try. Now you hit it in, you hit it past the pitcher. Okay, like
Yeah.
we're rewarding the improvement versus we're rewarding the absolute outcome, right? It has to be a hit. Because I say this to my high school kids that I work with in my practice, right? This is one of my favorite lines is like, what was it like? What do people do when you get a hit in T-ball? And they'd be like, everybody claps. I'm like, yeah. So from the time you're 4 or 5 years old, you're conditioned to get a good feeling from when you get on base. But
Right.
you dribbled the ball in front of the plate, and the kid who was behind the plate or on the pitcher's mound, they couldn't stand up straight. So you got on first base and everybody cheered. Doesn't mean you did anything great. It's the same thing now. You're 17, 18 years old, right? You're focused on the result because that's what gets you rewarded. But what about that process, right? What about hey, I had a good approach. I was able to hit the ball hard. I just hit it at somebody. I took some good swings, right? Can I judge my success in a different way? By the time they get to high school, they're so used to they're listening to the trained seals in the stands of like, yeah, you got to hit. Meanwhile, it was like you dribbler or you kind of bloop, right? Versus like, hey, I would rather, hit a laser to center field, right at the center fielder. So like that, like they're conditioned to be rewarded for those, like they feel good when they get on base, but let's reward them for the things that they can do that are in their control and the improvements that they're making. Don't worry about the results, because now we're starting to see this as a journey, right? A process of improvement versus, hey, I'm not a good player. I hate that, right? Or like,
Mm.
I'll use a school example. And you get this all the time. I'm not a math kid. I'm not a science kid. I'm not smart.
Yeah.
That's not right. You don't
No.
know, right? Like, and so like, but I think those in our language as parents, as adults, we reinforce that, and not knowingly, we don't do it purposely or consciously, but we reinforce that, right? We sort of have this fixed mindset, and the language that we use is really important, right? So that's, I think, a point of emphasis for dads is like, hey, just kind of pay attention to like the language that you're using, right? The words of you should just do this, you just and should, and like, I can't, or like all these sort of fixed kind of thinking ways, I think is really hard for a kid to interpret because they take it as, you know, like something wrong with me. And now they're
Right.
focusing on the result versus like, hey, I did something good. Like I want to do more of that thing, even though it wasn't perfect.
We focus on the kids, and then when I walk away, I think a lot of us are just big kids that have
Yes.
grown up because a lot of things are saying, I mean, in the workplace, similar things. Now we need outcomes in business, and we want good outcomes and everything, right?
Yeah, of course.
Great. We want to work for, but something that someone said 2 episodes ago, I think 3, if we're so focused, like, are we defined by our outcomes, or are our outcomes defined by who we are and the work that we put in and what we've done? And so if we focus so much on that, we could lose on the outcomes. And that's kind of who we identify us to be. I'm not. Um,
Yeah.
then it's going to take away from what can actually fix it, make a better outcome. It's a paradox.
Yeah. And the way I frame it, especially with older kids, is listen, outcomes are out of our control, right? Like once the ball leaves your bat, once the ball leaves your hand, you lose all control. It's not in your hand anymore. It's not on your bat anymore, right?
Right.
So what can we do that's in our control to maximize our chances of success? If I can look in the mirror at the end of the day and say I did everything I could to maximize my chances of success and it didn't happen, then I want you to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Right? And that's hard because we are socialized and conditioned to be like we're judging ourselves solely on the outcomes. And if I don't reach this goal, I feel bad about myself. Now, I feel bad about myself when I don't hit a goal or I don't get an outcome that I want. But am I able to reflect on it and go, you know what, like I did the best I could. You know what, I got a bad result. What can I learn from it and move forward? And that's the same for a dad, right?
Yep.
Dad goes to coach. You know what? I know I'm behind the 8 ball. Like I know I'm not going to be good at, or I believe I'm not going to be good at this. But what can I do today to help these kids and then learn from it and get better and be a better coach tomorrow? And, in 5 years, you can be the coach. You could coach a travel team, right? Because it's at the end of the day, you can learn how to be a better coach. You might not
Yeah.
think you're qualified today, but if you just throw yourself in and try to get better at it and learn, in 5 years, you could be the guy who's like the coach for the town, right? Like that's the guy
Yeah.
who has the reputation like you. You did it. You're still doing it. Like you're the guy, right? They look
Yeah.
to every year comes like, oh, who's coaching? We know who's coaching because he made himself into a coach that can be comfortable and can be effective. And kids like him and they want him there. And the parents like him and want him there. Like it doesn't, we don't
Yeah.
step into the role of coach overnight. None of us goes to school to be a baseball coach.
We don't, but there's an opportunity for you, Mike. We want to set up
Yep.
that school for Little League Baseball or coaches right there. No, just like anything, you get in, and the first time usually sucks, and then you just get better over time through repetition and learning. So
Yes.
that's a great point. I love it.
Yeah,
Um,
and I just want to add to that because I was thinking of a story and maybe I'll share it.
yeah,
But like as parents, like as coaches, as parents, we also have to like we're human, we have emotions, right? And sometimes those emotions come out the way we don't want them to, right? Like being
mhm,
able to be okay with like feeling a certain way, like and I had this happen to me a couple of years ago. So it was my son's last year of rec baseball. He was 14 and I know all the kids. I've been coaching for years. I know the dad on the other side. I know the kids on the other side for the most part. And we're playing this game and they're just running it up on us. They're running it up on us. They're running around the bases. They're kind of like just they're clowning us. I mean, I
mhm,
legit. And the kids are 14 and 13 and 14. So that they're not stupid. They know they're feeling it and I'm feeling it. And the coach on the other side is not stopping it. He's encouraging it. And I don't think it was malicious. It just was it was just the fact of the matter is he didn't really understand. Like he wasn't a baseball guy, right? I'm a baseball guy. At a certain point, you stop guys running. You hold them up on a single. It's 20-0 or 30. I mean, it literally was 20 or 30-0. It was so
wow,
bad. We had no pitching, and it just was going like it was the disaster. But we're
cool.
finishing the game out, and they're running on us, and everybody's feeling bad. And I just lost I the first time I ever lost my stuff. Like I just start screaming at him. I'm dropping f bombs. My kids are looking at it, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm that
Mm,
guy. But, in retrospect, I know that I'm human. I'm like, every one of these parents has seen me coach for 10 years. Like, they know who I am. They've never seen me lose my cool. There was a reason why I did it. I was trying to protect my boys. It
yeah,
wasn't the right response, but I didn't beat myself up over it. I just was like, you know what? I had a human moment and I'm like, I learned from it. I wish I didn't do it, but there was a reason why I did it and it's okay. And you move on. And like, I think that it's okay to be emotional, but
yeah,
like, it's also something we work on as parents is trying to like just regulate our emotions so that we don't make it so much about us that we then show, we demonstrate an example for the kids that it's okay to sort of lose our cool and say and do things that we're going to regret.
right. Yeah. Be a thermostat, not a thermometer, but every now and
Yes.
then that thermometer goes. And you probably had some parents that rolled up and were like, I'm so glad you said
Yes.
that.
Yeah,
But you're
exactly.
defending
And
the
I'm the
team.
guy that they would. Yeah, and I'm the guy over the last 10 years, they would criticize me because I was too calm and I was too nice and I was too, I was too, democratic. Everybody
Diplomatic.
played and they like, "No, you can't play everybody equally. They have to, you have to play the best players," and, like, but this was, like, the first time they ever seen me get pissed off, and I was they were like, "Yeah, you're right," and I was like, oh, man, maybe I should have done that sooner. But they were at that age where they could get it. I was reflecting what they were feeling and
Yeah.
I was trying to protect them. If I would have done that when they were 8, 9, it would have been not cool,
Right.
right? In my mind. But at 14, it was still not cool, but it was kind of justified and I could live with it and I could walk away from it. But if we're reflecting on the way we feel about things as parents and we're not letting that get the best of us, that's also going to be a really great tool to model the behaviors we want to see out of our kids.
Yeah. Yep. And that's opportunity too to come back at some point and say, hey, look, guys, I lost my cool.
Yes.
Not perfect. I learned from it. Here's what I learned from it. It may happen to you, but they're also then learning, hey, to step back, to reference it, not hide from it, avoid it, call it out, learn from it, move on.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Teaching them a little bit of humility. Sometimes you
Absolutely.
gotta eat it to teach a lesson.
Yeah. And sometimes it's the best lesson. Those are the
Yeah.
leaders doing it. But hey, where can I know these zoom zoom. Here we are. Time goes so fast.
Yes, very
Like where
fast.
can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're doing and you know, and keep up with you?
Yeah, sure. The best place to find me is on my website. It's Michael V as in Vincent Huber.com. There you can find all sorts of free resources, my podcast, the Freshman Foundation blogs, all my socials. So everything's kind of home base there for free if you want to check me out.
Put that in the show notes too, so everybody can just click on it. You don't have to, you know, pause button and drive and Google. Don't Google it, right? Um, Mike, I appreciate you being on, man. It was a great conversation, a lot of fun. You got me all fired up to go coach now.
It's
Uh,
baseball season. You got to be. It's awesome.
it's getting there. It doesn't feel like right now. It's really cold, but we're getting there. Uh,
That's my new joke. First of the year has passed, the new year has passed. It's now baseball season because everybody starts training indoors and all that fun stuff.
That's what I was just thinking. I gotta go get the cages. So, well, Mike, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on here, and I look forward to staying in touch with you and learning more from you.
Thank you so much, Zach. It's been a pleasure, and I loved it. I'd love to have another conversation with you
I think we might have another conversation about, the parent side of it, the ones that don't want to
offline.
coach. That would be fun. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Hey guys, if you made it this far in the podcast, I know you got some takeaways. Hope you had some laughs, like me, because a lot of things that Mike's talking about, I remember listening. Oh, yep, yep. And that's because we've been in the mix and we experience it. That's why I love doing this and talking to guys like Mike, because we're all on a similar journey with what we're doing with our stages of life. We learn the things, but then we can teach each other so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I know as we go in with baseball season, Mike said, it might be soccer season for you, whatever season it is, water polo, I don't know, but it's everyone needs a leader and these kids, whether it be a boys team, a girls team, you can serve are really important and showing them some of these things, but just showing up and giving them a place to play, have structure and to learn the game and have fun, big time. So look at your local teams. If you're already involved, see how you can jump in, go be an AC, talk to the head coach, see how you can help. And I think you're going to get a lot from it because we can use it. We can definitely use you. But I hope you took some things from Mike and I's conversation that you can apply to your journey to becoming the skilled dad.